There are two types of cables we can construct for Ethernet in order to connect devices together. Type 1 is a straight through cable, and this is the most common cable we have out there. And what it does is it just maps the pins directly. So pin 1 at one end of the cable matches up with pin 1 at the other end of the cable. So transmit positive at one end of the cable goes to transmit positive at the other end of the cable. Pin 2 is the same way, pin 3 and pin 6 all operate like that. Another type of cable that we need is a crossover cable. Now, a crossover cable works the same way that our telephone does. So I realize that we don't have this thing called a crossover cable with our telephone, but trust me, it's there. It's actually happening at the telephone company itself. Because when I'm speaking to my buddy on the phone, I'm talking into the mouthpiece. And where does my speech come out? The earpiece of his side. So we have to cross over my sending wire, which is connected to my microphone, to the receive wire, which is connected to the speaker at the other end of the telephone. Crossover cable is doing that exact same thing. Pin 1 was transmit positive, pin 3 was receive positive, pin 2 was transmit negative, pin 6 was receive negative. Pin 3 is receive positive, pin 1 is transmit positive. Pin 6, once again, receive negative. Pin 2, transmit negative. So we're just crossing over the connections so that when we are connecting two like devices together, we can make sure that what we transmit from one ends up being on the receive pins of the other. So we use these crossover cables when we're hooking up two routers, two PCs, and I'll go through some other examples of how we use that in a second here. But let's take a look at how the ends look in both a straight through and crossover cable. So on the straight through side, you see that pins 1 and 2 here on the leftmost side are orange, white, and orange. And then in the other side of the cable, pins 1 and 2 are orange, white, and orange. This is a straight through cable, and we can identify it as such because the colors of the wire for pin 1 and 2 and the rest of the pins match up on both sides. For our crossover cable now, we're going to find out that on our left end of the cable, pins 1 and 2 are white, green, and green. But on the other end of the cable, pins 1 and 2 are white, orange, and orange. If we look then, let's follow where the green cable goes. So pin 2 here on one side is green. If we look over on the other side and find out where green is, it is in position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on pin 6, we have green connected. Pin 3 has white green on this side. Over here we have pin 3 with white orange. Over here pin 3 is white green. So this is the idea that we're crossing over the wires. Pin 1 goes to pin 3. Pin 2 goes to pin 6. Pin 3 goes to pin 1. Pin 4 goes to 4, 5 goes to 5, and 6 goes to pin 2. 7 goes to 7, and 8 goes to 8. So there's our crossover cable construction. So when do we use it? So like I've already said, router to router, we need a crossover cable. Switch to switch, need a crossover cable. PC to PC, crossover cable. The general rule of thumb here, if it's like device to like device, we need a crossover cable. Now, when it's PC to router, we still need a crossover cable. However, once we put a switch in the middle, the switch pretty much, when we're connecting a switch to any other device besides a switch, we almost always use a straight through cable. So PC to switch, switch to router, we're going to use a straight through cable here. The reality is most of the cables that we purchase out there are straight through cables. Should we need to make a crossover cable? A really nifty thing has occurred is that we've actually built into the network interface cards the ability to auto detect whether or not the cable needs to be straight through or crossover. The technology is called Automitics, and Automitics is what automatically turns our cable from a crossover to a straight through or straight through to a crossover. So when you're practically applying this, more than 90% of the cases that you encounter, if not 95 or even 99% of the cases that you encounter, you're not going to have to worry about the cable type that you're implementing. However, as a network engineer, you should really have a good understanding of where to use a crossover and straight through cable. So Take a look at this, commit it to memory so that you can do well on your exam and impress somebody in the future when you know how to use a crossover cable. So this wraps up our conversation of Ethernet and switching. What you'll find in a future video is we're actually going to connect to the switch and do a configuration on it and take a look at all the MAC address information on there and see how the switch actually is operating from the command line interface of the device itself. So I look forward to seeing you in that future video and other videos from Train Signal. Thank you.